Good morning, sunshines. So today we're going to talk about blocking. Yay! Blocking is the physical stage movement of the actors on stage. Simple, sweet. You are, as a director, the ultimate responsibility for the blocking of the show. There are two basic types of blocking. There's what I call anecdotal blocking. Some people call it obligatory blocking. It is the physical things that have to happen on the stage. So for instance, in Crimes of the Heart, when she says, do you want a Coke? She needs to go to the refrigerator, Meg needs to go to the refrigerator and get a Coke. When Babe makes the lemonade, says, do you want your lemonade? She has to make the lemonade. There are just things that the play talks about having to happen. When Barnett's going through, rifling through the pages and comes across the picture of Willie J and Babe, there just needs to be a picture of Willie J and Babe. When a group of people come in from the cold, for instance in Doll's House, you come in from the cold, you need to take your coats and jackets off. Or when you're going into the cold, you need to put your coats and jacket on. The obligatory blocking, if you need to turn on lights, if you need to blow out candles, whatever just is described in the script as things that have to happen, that's your obligatory, that's your anecdotal blocking. It has to happen, or people are like, why didn't that happen? Now, for instance, if somebody says, sit down to someone, that suggests that they're not sitting before they say that to them. So you have to plan some times ahead so that when you say, come over here, they're not already over here. Unless you're gonna make some sort of statement like they're not paying attention or something like that. For instance, in A Few Good Men, Tom Cruise is trying to figure out how he's gonna deal with questioning an officer, and he comes up with somebody, he turns to the group and says, sit down. And they're already sitting. Well, he still has to play the beat of, oh, sorry, wasn't paying attention to what you guys are doing. Yes. So again, the script will provide you with what the obligatory blocking is. Anything else that's not anecdotal or obligatory is aesthetic. It is to create a good stage picture. Yes. As a director, the anecdotal blocking that happens or doesn't happen is the most obvious sign of a mistake or a young director, because when you miss something like how to use a dial telephone, if you use it in the wrong manner, because of course you have to pick up the handset, I guess what it's called, and then dial the entire number. You just don't push buttons. You have to do things the right way. And if somebody doesn't know how the object is used, obviously the people who know how the object is supposed to be used will know that the people didn't know what they were doing. But aesthetic blocking is much more, it's artistic. It is less obviously wrong. But there are some basic guidelines to that type of blocking. Before I get into those guidelines, here's an excellent video showing you a little bit about what blocking is in general.
Blocking a play seems like an easy task, but blocking involves more than meets the eye. It is essentially the external view of the characters and play's interior life. Blocking can be behavioral, psychological, symbolic, metaphorical, punctuation, character work, and meaning. Therefore, blocking choices should be made with careful consideration and rely on the interpretation of the characters and script. Blocking is a term which refers to the precise movement and positioning of actors on stage. Generally, a director is the person who makes and communicates the blocking choices for the play. There are two reasons for this. Number one, the director has developed a specific concept or vision for the show and is the leader of the rehearsal process that is meant to realize the director's concept. And number two, the director is an outside eye that can best see how actors are arranged on stage in relation to each other and the set. Even though blocking is the director's job, many directors realize that actors come to the stage with skills and instincts that can be used when blocking the show, so sometimes actors contribute to blocking choices as well. It really depends on the director whether all of the show's blocking choices come from him or her, or whether the rehearsals are also organic and develop out of a collaborative effort between both director and actors. My philosophy about directing is that blocking is all about relationships, and good directors give actors or help the actors to make choices about the character while blocking the show. If an actor doesn't understand why he or she is moving, it's going to look and feel false to an audience. Using a character's wants to find movement, as you've learned, is obviously an effective way to focus on relationships and begin the process of believably blocking a scene. But there are some blocking rules that are also important to follow when tackling the task of blocking so that your audience can best see and understand what's going on. Of course, these are not hard and fast rules, not much on stage is, but as beginners, these rules may help you make stronger choices in blocking. First, avoid flat blocking. Instead, work off of angles when moving an actor from one part of the stage to another. When a character is moving, angles look more dynamic on stage, and flat blocking seems boring. Secondly, implement triangles when blocking. Just as triangles carry energy and intrinsic beauty when creating composition on stage, they do so with blocking as well. Look at triangular blocking possibilities on stage and in relation to your set choices. Number 3, generally actors cross downstage from furniture or other actors. You should do this because scenes behind furniture can make the characters feel distant and unrealistic. Keep crosses in front of objects on stage. Number 4, when two characters are speaking to each other on stage and the scene is shared, make sure both actors are on the same plane. Oftentimes, inexperienced actors don't realize when they're upstaging someone else. Look at your feet. Where are they facing? And where are they in proximity to the other character? Number 5, avoid over-blocking your scene. When actors are in continual movement back and forth, sit down, stand up, lie down, run off, all this movement without stopping, it typically doesn't carry much meaning or reveal character. Remember to focus on motivated movement. Only have characters move when they are motivated or have a reason to do so. If you don't, your scene will look busy and will seem like nobody knows what's really happening in the scene and what's really going on with the characters. Find out what the point of the line or moment is and try to show that with your blocking. Number 6, look for ways to create build in a scene through blocking. If it is an intense scene and you start out with the actors in each other's faces, you're leaving yourself little room for build, and the scene becomes one long stalemate. Instead, work to show the build of the scene through the blocking in the scene. Of course, each of these rules can be broken if there are better ways to show the relationship on stage. Again, let the relationships, who the characters are, what their relationship is to the other characters on stage, what they want from other characters, how they try to get what they want, etc. Let those things drive your blocking choices first and foremost. Many people don't realize all the layers of blocking that exist when staging a show. Since this unit is about learning not only how to act, but also how to have a director's eye, consider layering your blocking rehearsals in this order. First, take note of and work through the obligatory blocking. This is the blocking that the scene demands, the entrances and exits and the playwright's notes. Things like answering a phone or walking to a window may be things that are written in the script, but how the choices are made on stage should be decided upon. Remember, you don't always have to follow the blocking written in the script. You can make your own choices if you want. Next, look at the basic blocking patterns. These patterns should communicate basic ideas about the scene. For example, in a love scene, the characters could begin far apart and then get closer together as the scene progresses. Remember, this also physically shows the build of the scene. With basic blocking patterns, it's helpful to first determine the scene's climax and where the characters may be in relation to each other in that moment. Then work through the rest of the blocking and make sure you build to that climax moment. Remember, let your characters' wants, obstacles, and tactics help you make blocking pattern choices. Another trick if you're uncertain about how to make choices in the blocking patterns of a scene is to find the actors' positions at each beat change and then fill in the rest. This will also help you to see whether or not you've physically created build in the scene. Now, of course, all blocking patterns are dependent on your set. Obviously, the objects placed in your environment on stage will impact your blocking choices. So be sure to make strong choices for what furniture pieces you'll be using in your scenes and where they can best be placed for the flow of the scene. Keep in mind that compositional rules for blocking also apply for furniture in a space. Here's some basic tips that might help you get started. First, try to keep furniture pieces on an angle, as straight lines generally look very flat on stage. Secondly, don't move chairs or couches up against a back wall. This will also flatten the scene. But more importantly, it limits blocking possibilities because everything has to be played in front of the furniture, which isn't always pretty and often upstages other actors. Third, create enough distance between furniture pieces for crosses in actor movement. If everything is smushed together on stage, it leaves little room for movement and build in your scene. Learning to interact with and move in relation to other things on stage is important when blocking a scene or show. For this reason, directors never start the rehearsal process for a show without knowing the design of the set and what furniture or objects will be in it. Of course, the cast doesn't work with the actual set until the production week, but the set is still represented in the rehearsal space so that the actors know exactly what they're working with, and so that the director can better block the show. Generally, a scale drawing of the set, as if seen overhead, known as the ground plan or set plan, is designed by a set designer, and the plan is taped out on the floor of the rehearsal space. Sometimes model sets to scale are also constructed by the designer to give the actors and director a better feel for the set they will have for the performance. Any furniture placed on the set is also used during rehearsals so that the rehearsal process closely mimics the actual performance space. Furniture plans are drawings that show where the furniture is placed on the set. You may want to consider making your own furniture plan when you begin working on scenes in class. Next, detailed blocking is the final stage in the blocking of a scene or a play. This is where you add your individualized score of physical actions. These are details, small movements, and stage business that will add to your scene and characters. Stage business is when an actor is doing something on stage other than crossing that adds believability and realism to a character. Let me give you some examples. In Arthur Miller's drama The Crucible, John Proctor, a Puritan farmer of Salem, Massachusetts, comes into the common room of his house after a long day of planting in the fields. He puts down his shotgun, goes to the fireplace, swings the pot out, lifts the ladle to taste, is not pleased, so he adds some salt. He then goes to wash his hands and face, and then goes to the table to sit down. John begins to eat. That's an example of stage business. Another example, in Crimes of the Heart by Beth Henley, 30-year-old Lenny McGrath comes into her kitchen carrying a brown paper bag. Saddened because everyone's forgotten her birthday, she pulls out a package of candles from the bag, retrieves a cookie from the cookie jar, takes a candle from the package, tries to stick it in the cookie, and then finally sings Happy Birthday to herself. In On Golden Pond by Ernest Thompson, Norman Thayer is in his 60s and he arrives at a summer cabin in Maine. Slowly and lovingly, he rediscovers the covered furniture, family photographs, and layout of the room. In The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams, Laura Wingfield, an extremely shy girl, is entertaining a gentleman caller at dinner. Laura's mother is anxious for her to impress the young man favorably. Suffering acutely from her shyness, Laura becomes sick at the table, and she is forced to retire into the living room where she escapes into a dream world by playing with her collection of glass animals. In A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams, Blanche Dubois, nervous and exhausted, comes to visit her sister in New Orleans. Finding no one home when she arrives, she lets herself in, explores the apartment, searches for liquor, finds some whiskey, and takes a drink to quiet her nerves. All of these examples show stage business by the characters described. Sometimes stage business is scripted, and sometimes it's not. Either way, stage business adds another layer to the scene and gives a scene and characters depth, while often revealing meaning in the scene as well. Now that you've learned the process of blocking a scene and some of the layers that give depth to a scene, you have the tools needed to block your own scenes. Good luck as you work to make strong blocking choices and create believable relationships on stage.
Yes. Again, I think that's an excellent guide to what blocking is as a whole. It doesn't necessarily go into what good and bad are, but at least gives you an idea of the type of things that directors should be paying attention to. First of all, she went over this kind of quickly, so let me expound on each of these areas a little bit more. She talks about 7 types of blocking. Yes. The first type of blocking she talks about is behavioral. Again, I'm going to say that is more along the lines of the anecdotal blocking we were talking about earlier. However, for instance, in the South, as a Southern man, I was raised that any time a woman walked into the room, I stood in her presence. Yes? So if you've got a place set in the South or in a society where this is a custom, whenever a woman walks into the room, the men would rise. It doesn't say it in the script. Nobody says rise up, that sort of thing. It is just something that is a behavioral thing that people of that period, of that time period, do. Yes, and there are many examples of this. I'm just giving a couple of examples. So, for instance, let's just go to Dracula. In Dracula, if somebody opens a curtain and the sun is shining, Dracula is going to hide his face because he's about to melt because he fears the sun. That's behavioral. That's a knee-jerk reaction to what's going on that may have an effect on the character. If, for instance, if there's a gunshot, people will tend to look toward where the noise was. Well, not necessarily a gunshot, just something, a loud noise. And for instance, if you're doing a play where somebody is, there was a moment in Sherlock Holmes movie where they were pretending to be somebody else, and so they decided that they were going to flip some glasses because anybody who was keeping their mind on being a fake would not necessarily react to spontaneous interruptions like glasses falling. And Watson is able to discover the guy who is the fake person, because the one person who doesn't respond to the glasses falling is the character who's trying to act like he's not the person that he is. So again, there are reasons why you can use those things to show character, or to show storytelling, that sort of thing. But that's behavioral blocking. It's external. Yes, the stimulus happens in the world. Yes. The second is psychological. That's internal blocking. It is things that you do, not really even aware that the character does those sort of things. Tics. When a character walks by, for instance, in Count Hot Tin Roof, whenever Maggie enters the room, Big Daddy, who is lusting after Maggie, needs to put full focus on, no matter what the lines are, right? The psychological aspect of Big Daddy is, I'm hunting that, okay? And so he needs to pay full attention, unless there's something really important to get his attention away from his focus on Maggie the cat, yes? But just as an example, plays are replete with it. Another type of blocking is symbolic. For instance, I'm gonna say, in Don Giovanni, the ghost is death, or his father, yes, when he appears. That's a symbolic action. The character is bigger than just being the character. Again, a lot of times this can point to the character's understanding of how the actor is responding, but it is a larger meaning than just what's happening. It's a deeper meaning, more symbolic. Then there's more things that are more character driven, like for instance in Doll's House, when she's described as being a squirrel. She should just flit around the stage. She just has picks up little pieces here, takes them here. She's constantly at work doing something. That is more the metaphorical type of blocking, things that just give you a sense of character, not necessarily the whole play. Punctuation, things like slamming things on the table, like jumping on tables, like passing out on the floor, whispering. Both large and wailing, crying with tears. Those sort of things need to be limited because if they're done more than once, they lose their impact. So as you're looking through your play, discover as a director, where is it in the play that I can be the quietest? Where should I be the quietest? Or should the character be the quietest? Where should they be the loudest? Where can they be the angriest? Where can they be the calmest? Right? So you find your extremes, and then everything else has to happen within those extremes, yes? But those are punctuation marks. It causes an audience to wake up, to pay attention to that moment, right? We'll talk about this in a second, but whenever you have either stillness or constant movement, whatever the rhythm of the play is, if you have somebody going counter to that can be a punctuation. So for instance, let's say that everybody is still and somebody comes in suddenly and is bouncing off the wall. you can't help but look at that character who's bouncing off the wall. If everybody's bouncing off the wall and you have one character still, you can't help. If you've ever seen a video of people running through Times Square, or not necessarily Times Square, what's the Grand Central Station? There's often videos of people waiting for their love to get off a train, and of course everybody else is running 90 miles an hour to get to the train, and there's this one person that's just stopped there waiting for somebody to show up at the clock to meet. And it's very easy to spot that one person, but very hard to focus on the many, yes? So anytime you have something in contradiction to the norm, you're gonna create a punctuation mark in the blocking, yes? Character, again, these are gestures. These are things like me putting my glasses on, me putting my hand in my pocket, ticks. I know that I, tick my teeth because of watching the videos of me talking recently. There's just things that people, hopefully it's character driven. What you want to do is to try and avoid, as I just tick my teeth again, you want to avoid things that are personal and make sure that the choices the actor are making are character driven. You also need to watch out for, there are a lot of different sort of, I'm gonna call them actor anomalies. I've had several, but there's this habit that actors sometimes have of throwing the basketball. They'll be looking to the person they're going to get their cue line from, and then when they finish talking, they're going to look at the person who speaks next. They're not looking at them because they want anything. They're looking at them because they're playing basketball. They're throwing the basketball back and forth, and so that's more of a personal tick, not a character tick. Yes. And so as a director, you need to make sure the actor is aware that they're doing that, because oftentimes they do it totally unaware that they're doing those type of things. A lot of actors, as I tick again, a lot of actors will stand in pike positions as opposed to standing erect because, again, just different character ticks that happen. Make sure that whatever they are, they're character driven and not actor driven. And then the last one, of course, that she gives in the video is the meaning, the discoveries, the aha moments, when, again, it should be altering moments, when somebody has a belief that somehow has changed for whatever reason in the course of the play. Those typically, even if they're not the climactic moment of the play, they're important moments of discovery. And so having a focus, having a shift in the patterns that have been established. For instance, let's say we've got a character who is sort of wishy-washy. Well, every movement they make is sort of non-linear. It's circular, it's avoidance, it's all this sort of stuff. When suddenly, I'm just going to use Aronoff and Glengarry Glen Ross. He has been a very weak character the entire play. Then suddenly he gets accused of the crime, and suddenly he's like, you guys are hanging me as a scapegoat. And he becomes very linear. He becomes very adamant. He becomes very loud when he has been none of those things beforehand. Right? So again, that points to the meaning that has happened. There's something important that just happened. So the audience is going, uh-oh, we need to pay attention to what happened to Aronoff here, because that is the problem. He has discovered a new world attitude. Yes, and so those are times when audiences pay most attention. Ultimately, blocking is about relationships, about how the characters relate to one another. Having one character on stage, you can affect the rhythm, you can affect the choices, but really you're not going to have to worry about how they get in anybody's way. You're not worried about staging yourself, all that sort of stuff. Two characters, again, it's awful tough to ruin two characters. I'm not saying impossible, but it's awful tough to have two characters. When you have more than two characters, that's when you get into a bind of who has dominance in the stage, who has the power, who is ceding power, who is on the chase, who's being chased. Again, these are all psychological underlying games that are being played. And just talking about Big Daddy and Maggie the cat. Not only is Big Daddy chasing Maggie, Maggie is encouraging it. Maggie looks and leers at Big Daddy in order to draw him in because she wants to inherit his wealth. So she is not discouraging to his leers, if that makes any sense. It may not be the character, the actor's work, yes, but it's the way the characters work in the play, right? So finding the character-driven reasons for action is very important. I have a couple of rules. these are pretty steadfast. When you're telling a joke, don't laugh at your own joke. Let the audience find the humor. If the audience doesn't think it's funny and they don't laugh, it's not their fault. One of the things about theater, it's a living creature. And every night you have to find a way to communicate to that audience. And so sometimes as an actor, you find that there are difficult pulls. One of the things, for instance, I'm just going to use this as an example. It may not be 100% true, but sometimes it's true. Sunday afternoons, the audiences tend to be a little older, tend to be a little bit more hard of hearing. And so it could be, as an actor, you need to slow things down a bit and be louder so that the audience can hear what's going on. And then that way you can play to that audience. That same audience, that same play on a Saturday night when everybody's tipsy and you're going to get a laugh, no matter whether you say the line right or not, barrel through. You got it won already. Don't lose them, right? So again, plays, you should give your actors freedom as a director to play to the audience, to the crowd that night. Just realizing that plays are different from one version to another, but they're also different night to night. And not only are they should be, because the audience is a very integral part to the show, and no two audiences are the same. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about this more next class period, but one of the things about plays is they have to be performed for that day's audience. There are just things in the world that happen that change attitudes, that change relationships. There's a line in Midsummer Night's Dream where he calls the woman an Ethiop. Not on its face, bold face, inward, but that's what it means. And so with modern sensibilities, I don't even want to go there. It wasn't something that Shakespeare was trying to do. He wasn't trying to rile her up, he was just trying to insult her. And so we've changed the line from Ethiop to ragworm, because they talk about how low she is a lot. Simple choices, but again, I think it goes more along with the flavor of the show as opposed to trying to insult somebody with modern sensibilities. You have to be aware of what those sensibilities are. For instance, in the past year, I've become aware of pronoun importance. He, she, they, whatever. I love the people that want to be called they. But you have to, at least allow for people to allow you to know what their pronouns should be. And so that's something that has come around very recently in my world. Hell, it may have been around for 20 years, I just never was aware of it. But in my life, I've become much more aware of it. And so like on audition forms, I will put a he, she, check mark, which pronoun should I address you as? So that it's very clear and very open. There are people who identify not by the sex they may have been given at birth, right? And so you have to allow for those types of accommodations. The other thing is, going along with don't laugh at your jokes, don't cry at your own stories. Let the emotion carry through to the audience. If you take away their tears, it's one thing to watch somebody cry, it's another thing to feel their pain. I think plays work best when you let the audience feel the pain. So just in general, now, is there a time to cry? Yes. Is there a time to laugh? Absolutely. But not at the joke or not at the transition moment. Along those lines, when you're looking at rhythms, you need to really make sure as a director that each character has their own rhythm. People have their own rhythms. As a director, you are going to have a rhythm that you will infuse to your actors. You need to make sure that isn't your rhythm being imposed on the character. For instance, my rhythm, as you can probably tell from all these lectures, is fast. I love talking fast. But that doesn't mean that a certain character's rhythm shouldn't be slow, right? Or even meandering, right? I tend to be straightforward, have my little list of things to talk about and get a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, thank you, see you next time period. But that is my personal rhythm. It shouldn't be the rhythm that every character in my play has. Although I will tell you, I will encourage my actors to be as quick as possible to get to the important parts where we can lay claim to certain aspects. All right, here's who has the power, what do characters want, what are their objectives, What are their obstacles? Those are all important questions to discovery as to how to stage a scene. Now, here's some practical elements. I'm going to tell you the 9 basic stage areas: down from center, stage right, stage left, up center, 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 stage right, stage left, up center, up right, up left. There are just areas of the stage that are more powerful. The most powerful place on a stage, in a proscenium stage, is downstage center. Yes, you have the power, everybody's looking at you, everybody can see you. Downstage center is where the power position, yes? Now, just because a person has the power doesn't necessarily mean they want to stand there, especially early in a scene. Because one of the things, you don't want to play the end of the scene, you want to let the scene happen. And so if a person gains power through the course of the scene, then they can take claim to down center, yes? But down center is something that should be fought over by the people who are looking for the power in the scene. The second and third strongest are stage right and stage left. Oftentimes, the more powerful of those positions will be determined by the design of the set. The set will often give you focus that may shift from one side to the other. I'm going to say in general, because Americans tend to read from left to right, that as the audience views the stage, stage right probably is a little bit more powerful, just out of the two, than stage left, but I'm not going to say it's necessarily so, especially depending on the design. Center, I would say, is the 4th most powerful, up center 5th, and then up right, up left, down right, stage right, stage left are sort of all in the latter category, right? Now, having said that, anytime you have somebody move on stage, like if everybody's sitting, if you're doing 1776, for instance, and everybody's sitting at their desk and they're all fanning themselves, and then suddenly somebody stands up and pounds their desk and they're up left, can you focus on that? Absolutely. That person has just did a power punctuation blocking, and you can't help but look there, right? So I'm not saying they can't be useful, but that person should not be George Washington. George Washington needs to be up center controlling the Congress, right? Ben Franklin needs to be down right or down left, depending on which way you're going to do that, because he's the next biggest focus. And then you got Thomas Jefferson or John Adams, depending on who's the next most in your attitude in the other position, yes? So as you're blocking a show, you need to think out who has the power and where you want the power to move from one to the other. Once you have established power positions, there's also the power of the actor and the way they address themselves. Again, the most powerful way for an actor to address an audience is straightforward. The strongest body position is looking straight out at the audience. Now, I'm going to say in modern terms, in realistic acting, having an actor stand full front is just odd. It's a presentational style that belongs to the period of Shakespeare, of Moliere, that sort of thing. But having a character stand full front, unless they are making a proclamation or, you've got some messenger coming in, going with 1776. The messenger comes in to read the letter from George Washington. Sure, have them stand straight front because they're addressing the crowd, right? But generally, a full front in a realistic play is probably not the best of choices. Most times, actors are going to stand in a 3/4 position towards one another, yes? Because it opens themselves up to the audience, but it also opens them up to the other actor, right? I'm going to say the weakest body position is facing straight up stage. We've talked about this before, but I'll mention it here. That's what the reason that most people, when they stage Death of a Salesman, start the play with a strong downlight on Willie Loman standing down center, facing up stage in the middle of the play, the beginning of the play, is because it's an excellent metaphor for having this power position, downstage center, and to have this character be in the weakest known position, usually crouched over from the day's work, usually carrying his baggage that he's having to have with him, and a strong downlight so you can't even see his face. He is the true everyman. We don't even know who he is, and yet he's in the power position downstage center. It just is an excellent metaphor to begin the play. Now, does that mean you have to do it? No. Especially if it's been done ad infinitum and you just are trying to find a new way of addressing the play, or if you're not in a proscenium space, there's lots of reasons not to do it. But man, I would have to have a really good reason not to do it, because that's a great way to start that play, right? I mean, again, for me. So you're the storyteller, you're the director, you get to choose things like that. So body positioning on the stage, but also body positioning with each other, relative body position to other actors. Again, if the characters are all looking at one person, that'll give you focus. One of the things we talked about this in composition, but I'll reiterate it here. Composition has a couple of things. There's depth of stage, right? The closer you are to the front of the stage, the stronger you tend to be. There's levels. The higher you are up, the higher if there are stairs or levels or landings, people who are higher up on those levels tend to be stronger. And there's the focus of the play, right? If you've got 10 people on stage and they're all looking at the one person standing down there, the audience is going to look down there. If everybody's meandering, looking everywhere else, then you have to find a different way, whether it's pounding the desk or whatever the punctuation mark is, if you're going to gain focus. And again, it could be that everybody is sitting still and one person's moving. That's the way to gain focus. I mean, there are many ways to gain focus as you're blocking the play. As just a general rule of thumb, there are a couple of things that happen on stage that just don't happen in life. One is what I'm going to call a counter. In life, when one person walks, another person doesn't necessarily affect the other person. But in theater, if you have two people standing side by side and one person crosses in front of the other one, in theater it's often nice to have the other person counter them and move to where the first person started. Right? It's just a nice little way to get a little movement. There isn't any loss or gain of power. It's just that we can still be seen by the audience as opposed to standing in front of the other actor, and it's called upstaging the other actor because the other actor has to look behind them to look at you if they're talking to you, right? So actors, one of the things about, as a director, you have to be aware of the picture, make sure everybody can be seen, nobody's upstaging anybody, but also make sure that your focus is always in the direction of the audience, unless of course it's not. You know, when you're hanging in the Crucible, when John Proctor gets hung at the end, obviously the focus is upstage and everybody's gonna be looking that way because the poor man's about to get hung. So there are times when your focus is upstage or the directions, but in general you want the audience to be the one that's commanding the stage or listening or seeing what's going on. Yes? Again, don't, all movement on stage should be motivated. Even sitting still should be motivated. If a person is sitting still, there are reasons to sit still. One is I'm mad. I'm not going to play. I'm going to sit here still and I'm not going to say anything. That's a motivated reaction, right? So all action on stage should be a motivated action. Now, as a director, sometimes you have to give an external reason, that behavioral reason, to get somebody to move. And that's when you have to get an action that has a justification as opposed to a motivation. I need to go over and turn the lights on, A, because somebody's got to turn the lights on, and B, I need you out of that position because that position needs to be by somebody who is more powerful, right? Or the stage picture needs to shift here, or whatever the reason is. But it's a justified movement as opposed to a motivated movement. Don't overblock. Sometimes there's nothing wrong with just having people sit and talk. Again, next class period, we're going to talk about good and bad. And one of the things about Peter Brook is that he's a big advocate of trimming away the excess. If the movement isn't necessary, then cut it. Hone the performance down so that everything is done with a purpose and a meaning. Yes, don't play the end of the scene. Let the scene grow. As a matter of fact, sometimes it works best if you can sort of stage the play so that you can see the people working around the dominant position on stage. Nobody takes the end until the moment the power is seized. Yes? Again, I like having the idea of all blocking takes time. One of the things you forget as you're directing is you have time to get there. All blocking is ephemeral. It's only there for a moment. So, just because you have a nice stage picture doesn't mean you have to get there early. Take your time, work into it. Let the scene develop. Let the actors find the moment and find the rhythm. Everything in theater is dynamic. It's always adjusting because of one character's movement or the other. Initially, you're going to have rehearsals that are all about the big moves. Eventually, you're going to get to the little moves. The little things like rubbing your two fingers against your thumb. the little things like, brushing your hair, that sort of stuff. Again, you want to make sure that those movements are character driven, not actor driven. But again, I'm not saying totally eliminate the actor driven, because again, different actors may be more like their characters than you want to imagine. And so sometimes that type of action, even though it's a personal thing, can also work for the character. So again, be open to those sort of things, but also be aware so that you're not, so that if it's a personal thing as opposed to a character thing, it doesn't, you can strike it. This is what's called the polishing phase. During this phase, somewhere in this phase, you're going to have actors get what's called off book. They're going to initially walk around with their scripts in hand, writing down their blocking. Again, stage managers are invaluable during this period, because even though you may have gone in with a plan about how you're going to stage the scene, as Eisenhower said, the first thing to go out in war is the plan. I would encourage you as a director to go in with an idea of how you're going to stage the scene. Again, some directors are more open to organic movement, to letting the actors have a voice. I tend to allow actors to have a choice within a scope. And so, but I like to get the big parts of the pictures sort of laid in, and then they can decide how churning the water is, or how high the mountain is, or what color the tree is. But at least I'm going to tell them where the tree, where the mountain, where the brook are, yes, in the painting. So I would encourage you to have a basic plan for the action of the scene. But again, allow yourself to be open to different character interpretations, because we've all had different lives, we all have different backgrounds, and having a character that's interesting and different can be inspirational. And especially if it's something that the actor could bring that you may not have ever brought to the scene, be open to that sort of stuff. Anyway, the actors are going to do things like paraphrase. They're going to do things like bobble lines. They're going to be they're going to forget cues. As a director, you have to be ready to help make the leaps or to find the problem with the connections in the actor's brain as to why they can't get from one transition to the next. Often blocking can be that transition. If you can associate a move with a line, I mean, again, not to, but to be or not to be, right? It's sometimes nobody's gonna forget that line. But just as an example, having a gesture that associates with each line, if you say this to be line and you're like, oh Lord, what is the next line? I don't know, but I raise this hand, it's not to be, right? And so finding a gesture can help sometimes get an actor past a spot in the play where they're having difficulty finding a connection. Obviously, finding a way for the actor to connect without those gestures would probably be preferable, but not necessarily. Sometimes gestures are very powerful things. But again, those are sort of added into this polishing phase once the script is down, and once you're not worried about the big picture anymore, you're now worried about the little picture and exactly how you hold a feather pen or whatever, pencil or whatever it is that you're trying to worry about as a director, so that the play makes sense in the reality of the play, yes? I'm gonna say, these are a couple of rules about creating tension. Whenever you have an object of desire, it could be a person, a place, a thing, like it could be a throne, that's a place. A thing could be a book, a person, it's obviously a person. And you have somebody who desires that. It is often nice to place impediments in between, physical impediments that people have to work around to achieve whatever their goal is, yes? I mean, it just adds to the tension of the scene, and it may explain why tensions even arise, yes? So a lot of times having physical barriers between the goal or the object of a character's desires can be helpful. Diagonals. Flat blocking, walking from one side of the stage and proscenium stage is death. It's boring. It is mind-numbingly boring. It'll put you to sleep faster than anything. But diagonals are exciting. Even walking away is exciting. Walking towards is exciting. If you have two actors on stage and they're both standing, the person who is speaking generally wants to walk down stage as the other person is standing. However, let's say the one person who's speaking is doing some sort of your uniform is not fitting kind of thing or something. They may want to walk up stage eyeing the other person. So I'm not saying it's never appropriate, but generally speaking, we have two people on stage, both standing. The one person who's talking wants to cross in front of the other person who's also standing. If you have a person seated on stage, the actor who's talking wants to walk up stage with that person in general, because you want to be able to see both faces. And if the actor walks in front of the seated person, you're going to hide one of them. Yes? And so, again, generally speaking, you want to walk downstage of furniture, and your furniture wants to be away from the wall. In life, you put tables and chairs against walls. In theater, you put them away from walls so that you have full access to the table, chair. Again, if you have a bench on stage, I promise you, an actor's gonna put their foot on the bench. It's like, I don't know, honey to a bee. It's gonna happen. An actor sees a bench on stage, they go up there and put their foot on it. It doesn't happen in life. I know there's a bunch of benches at AUM's campus. I've never seen anybody stand there with a foot on it. But on stage, first thing an actor does, puts their foot up on it. Not wrong, but it's just something to be aware of, and make sure it's character driven, not actor driven. Having things that are equal in desire, that are equal on stage, if it would be a person, place, or thing, can be very helpful, so that one is not dominant. Let's say you have two characters who are both fighting for the love of another person. Put the love interest in the middle and have the other two characters both equal stage right and stage left, so you can see them fighting over the main object. Yes, create, again, always try and create a depth to the stage, because it's much easier to find a rationale to move downstage than it is to find a rationale to move upstage, typically. So I would encourage you to always at least attempt to try and have people, when they first enter or first seen, farther away from the power places, so that they can move to the power places, unless the scene is about somebody losing their power, in which case having the person on a throne downstage center. I mean, Richard III being overthrown by his army, by God, put him downstage and have him come and rip him out of the chair and throw the throne away. He has been usurped. So again, these are general rules, not necessarily laws to live by. Again, once you want to find the axis of the space, and you can, especially in large crowd scenes, you can create an axis by having people create triangles. Triangles are the strongest form in nature. So if you can create not only diagonals, but also triangles on stage, those are very strong statements. So again, I would try, if you can work your way into creating triangles, I would go with those. Again, the biggest thing for actors to discover as far as motivating their character are the different tactics they may use to achieve a goal. And again, the tactics will often tell you gesture, it'll often tell you tempo, it'll often tell you how aggressive or how regressive a character might be, how intimidating a character might be. Again, having somebody who is tall, intimidating somebody who's short, that's easy. Having somebody who's short, intimidating somebody who's tall, welcome to standing on a chair. Welcome to having the person sit while the other person is standing, right? As a director, there are ways of making that short person intimidating, right? Whack the person in a knee and have them on the floor, right? You create the intimidation. Never shy away from having sex as your character's rationale. More often than not, it is the easiest thing for an audience to understand and to appreciate. So having different actors who will look at one another in leering ways, or a wink or a nod, sex sells. Hate sometimes is hard to understand because you don't know why they're hating each other, but sex, it just sells. So that a lot of times, if all else fails, just make it about sex. Be careful not to get too comfortable in a rehearsal space, because you start playing that room as opposed to playing the theater itself. So always make your actors aware, if you're in a rehearsal space, that this is working in this rehearsal space, but once we get in the theater, you may need to be louder, you may be farther apart, whatever the differences are in the space, you need to constantly make sure your actors are aware of the differences, so that when they get on stage, they're accustomed and expecting to have their performance altered as opposed to doing the same thing they've been doing in a rehearsal room. Because again, you're going to spend a lot more time usually in a rehearsal room than you're going to spend in the performance space, at least until the show begins. Cool. I'm going to show you a little video about just me attacking a scene and how it stages a scene. I'm not saying it's the be-all, end-all, but just to give you an example of how my thought process would work in developing staging of a scene. All right, so you got a blank stage. I'm just going to use Midsummer Night's Dream because it's the play I happen to be working on right now. But you've got 5 characters. Theseus is the count of the Athenians. You got Aegeus, who's the father of Hermia. Hermia is in love with a man named Lysander. But the father wants her to marry a man named Demetrius. Demetrius and Lysander, according to the play, are both alike in dignity and fair Verona, where we Laristic. No, it's in Athens. So you got 5 people that are going to come onto the stage. As the stage direction gives you, Theseus is already on stage. So again, nothing. One of the things about Shakespeare, it typically works best in what I'm going to call continuous action. Even though Shakespeare scenes happen in different places, the less stuff you can have on stage, as Peter Brook is going to talk about next time period, the less stuff you have on stage, the less stuff you have to change. So because Shakespeare works best as a continuous piece, even though the set changes, it's better not to have really, it's a unit set that has levels, maybe that sort of stuff. Again, I'm just going to go with this with a blank floor just to show you how we attack a scene. But knowing that the set design may have some impact on what I'm about to show you. So Theseus on stage, again, he's the count, the duke. I'm gonna put the audience down here. So downstage center is right here. So there's the power position, yes. Theseus is the duke. Again, I'm going to put him in a power position, but I'm putting more upstage, so he has some place to go if he needs to. Now, I've got 4 people. They could come in any order. It doesn't say what order they come in. Aegeus has the next line, but all 4 people are on stage before Theseus says, "Why are you here?" And Aegeus then explains why they're there. That's the next line in the play, but I got to get 4 people on stage. Could they come from different sides? Maybe. One of the things that has happened is Aegeus has confronted his daughter Hermia, and Hermia has said that she will not do what his bidding is, which is to marry Demetrius. She's going to marry Lysander no matter what he says. And so it seems to me there has been some conflict that has happened off stage. And Aegeus has said, "I'm going to Theseus and he will tell you that you have to marry Demetrius." That's the offstage action. We don't see it. I'm making it up in my mind that that's what's happening. So Aegeus, it seems to me these 4 people have had this fight. Aegeus has started moving toward Theseus, being the younger couple. I think Hermia, I'm just going to have them, because they're over here, they could come in from over here, but I'm going to have them come in from up left. Hermia is going to enter, and then I'm just going to have her come in and move past Theseus to down right. I think she would be followed closest by Lysander because they're the ones that are the couple. I think Lysander would walk in, see what's going on, see Theseus being intimidated by Theseus, and I'm going to have him cross back down left. Then I'm going to say that these 2, Aegeus and Demetrius, are a couple. They're bonded together, so I'm going to have them enter together. But I think Aegeus comes in and bows at the foot of Theseus, because Theseus is the count, and I think Demetrius fills in this hole. So you've got Hermia down right, Theseus up center, her lover, Lysander, in her same power position, same level on stage. You got Demetrius here in the quarter line, and initially Aegeus is here kneeling before Theseus. Yes? Theseus says what's going on. Aegeus describes that his daughter, and I'm going to have him move stage right to fill in this hole. Got a nice triangle, yes. That his daughter Hermia is in love with Lysander, but that he, the father, wants her to marry Demetrius. And I'm going to say that during the course of this description, Aegeus is going to cross over here and join beside Demetrius, so that they become a couple. Then as he crosses left, I'm going to have Theseus sort of fill in here and come up behind Hermia and explain to Hermia that Theseus is the duke, the count, and that Athens law says that the father can command her to marry who he chooses, and the choice that he has, if she chooses not to marry Demetrius, is to kill her. right? Now, I'm going to have her facing away until she hears that he's going to kill her, in which case I'm going to use that as the time when she turns. Like, are you really going to kill me? That's crazy. And then you have the two that she's looking at. The choices is Lysander or Aegeus and her daddy and Demetrius, who are standing here together, and Theseus can point out the two choices that she has, life and death. Yes? Now, Aegeus has some sort of throwaway lines about, yes, you see what I told you, all that sort of stuff. But then Hermia pulls back and turns back away from him and says, I don't care what you say, I'm going to marry Lysander. And Theseus, I'm going to say, sort of is weakened by that, but he sort of crosses to the middle, and in the course of the cross, sort of acquiesces and says, you know what? Instead of killing you, I'm going to throw you in a nunnery, but I'm going to give you 4 days to decide. And at this point, Aegeus attacks Hermia, but of course, you've got Theseus here to block him. And so you have these two sort of meeting here in the middle, at which point Theseus says, Demetrius, I need you to come with me. We got something to talk about. And Aegeus, you come along with us, and these three are going to exit up left where they came from, right? So you now have the confrontation between Aegeus and Theseus. Again, he doesn't get too close because Theseus is going to make the choice. But then once they've left, I'm going to say that if Theseus is trailing on this, as he gets up left, he's going to turn and look back on these people and sort of roll his eyes. Like, this is the last thing I needed was some family dispute in my day of real work as he leaves. But then after he leaves, Hermia is going to come up here, moving to center, and fall on her knees and cry overly loud so that she can make sure that her daddy and Demetrius hear how upset that she is, but she's fallen on her knees. Lysander's going to cross to her, and his lines are basically something to the effect of, don't worry, I've got it figured out. And he helps her to stand to her feet, and he describes his plan to run away from Athens, that he has an aunt that lives in the next country that will welcome them. She's always loved him, and so they can go run away. And so what I'm going to end it with is Hermia sort of come to the realization as she crosses downstage, she can start touching, figuring out the plan that yes, she can go and get her stuff out of the house tonight, and that tomorrow they can meet in the woods. And so sort of end with Hermia standing downstage in the power position with Lysander right behind her over her shoulder, comforting her. And they've now taken the power position at the end of the stage. So again, I've saved the down center for the very last plotting point of the scene. Again, could it be done in a variety of ways? Absolutely. But just as a scheme for every moment of that little scene we just described being available to the audience, having a well-shaped picture, having people in the power positions visible, people giving away power, people moving away and reacting to others on stage. I just think that's a nice way of at least approaching it. Again, as we talked about earlier, one of the first things that goes out the window is the plan. Once the actors get involved, there may be other things they may bring to the table, but at least you can go in with an idea of what you want to accomplish, and then how you get there may change over time. And again, you have to be open to those changes, but we'll talk more about that next time. Again, for next time, you need to make sure that you're getting your prompt script together. Again, just as a reminder, we talked about this before, but there are 3 sections to the prompt script. You have your beginning section, which has phone numbers, which has rehearsal reports, which has rehearsal schedules. The middle section is your script with all the blocking. Then your last section is all the research, all the cue sheets, all the set diagrams, all the things that are in the back. So these are the ways you need to order that prompt script. Again, your blocking project is only going to be a 6 or 7 page or so scene from Crimes of the Heart. But you need to, and again, you don't have to have the set diagram. You can just tell me, as this person did, with the writing the blocking on here and then pointing where the action happens. Or you can put your set diagram on here and just have the drawing with the lines like this. Or you can have the combination of the two, where you have the drawing of the lines with the actions as they're described with the moments they happen here. But that's for the blocking project, which is not for another week or so. Yes, but you need to have your prompt script put together and ready for presentation. Cool? Cool. We'll see you next time.